Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, I just want to cover kind of where we are at this point in the window, where we are going. I've done a bunch of lives this week, but I wanted to do kind of a shorter, more direct video just on exactly what's happening, as I don't really have the need to do like another bunch of lives with a bunch of questions, and I think I can answer everything here and just kind of summarize it in a better sense of exactly where we are at as of today, and what is really kind of coming next, if anything, in this window, and where we can go from here. So we'll talk about the Dorgu thing, as there's some small delays that shouldn't be a problem. We'll talk about Garnacho and Rashford. Talk about Tell, potentially, Dorgeles, other maybe names that we might be looking at. And then I also want to look ahead and talk about summer, because there's an overall plan for our transfers that carry forward through the windows. And the whole idea in January behind the business so far has been, can we get anything done that we would like to do in summer that we can afford to do early? And that was the reason for Dorgu, that it was more desperately needed now, but it's all a part of the long-term plans, not short-term decision making. So there are more things we know that they're going to do in summer, just based on our information and even some names and such lining up. So we will get into that and everything else. So let's start with Dorgu. Transfer summer. I messed up the wording there, but transfer summer. We've got, obviously at this point, the deal for Dorgu is agreed. It's all set. Everything is fine. However, we're still kind of waiting for him to travel. He was set to travel this morning as of yesterday, but then it's been kind of delayed just a little bit, it seems like, according to Fabrizio Romano. We're talking about potentially he'd likely travel on the weekend. So maybe it'll be Friday, maybe it'll be Saturday. It means we won't have him in for Sunday's game. I think that's against Leicester. In all likelihood, was he going to play in that game? I don't know. He could have been on the bench for sure. I would have expected him to be, but obviously that makes it a little more difficult. No expectation as of right now of any issues, and it probably changes absolutely nothing again, because it's it's all agreed. So the annoying little things that we always tend to deal with. That the one account on Twitter as well, Menace, same as I had the info that he would be here today for his medical, and as mentioned that it's been rescheduled, and maybe they're waiting for everyone to come back from Europe, where they are today, so they'll be back tomorrow, and then I would guess maybe it'll be Saturday that they'll get this all done, when everybody's there. Again, probably makes virtually no difference. I guess technically he won't be here for the deadline anyway, I suppose, for Sunday. So we'll wait to see, next week when he's in the team. At least that'll give him a few more days of training and things like that to actually get in. So, we play we play Palace on Sunday. So Leicester will be on Friday of next week. So there's probably a pretty decent chance that he can be in the squad for that. Not a decent chance, he'll be in the squad for that. And then we'll have a few days of training, but probably now looking like not for Sunday. So that's okay. A little annoying, but we deal with that. It's one more game that we probably should be able to win, and should be winning, and should be doing well with regardless. But obviously, we always get impatient about getting these deals done, and I know everybody gets frustrated with it. It always seems like there's like an extra day or two that just kind of pops up out of nowhere to delay things, but it is what it is. And he will be here, so there's nothing to worry about there as of now. Moving on to Tell and Dorgeles. So I bring both names up, not necessarily because Dorgeles is still a topic for the summer. I mean, for this window, but potentially one for later, and he's a name we've been linked to correctly during this window. To discuss his situation real briefly, in summary again, we were interested in him. We did approach Salzburg about it, but I believe based on the price that they want and where we are at and where our finance is at, the decision was made to prioritize that left wing back, that we likely would not be able to get both deals done, barring some sale, and also that perhaps the price was a little inflated due to it being January. It's a player that I could see us returning for if we decide we need that position come summer. And, barring a late sale here of somebody else where we have a bunch of money and we go to them and they want to sell, that could change things. But it seems more likely it'd be a name. We'll see how he does over the next 6 months, 5 months. Come back in summer, see if there's a realistic fee, and look at it at that time if we need him. And we'll discuss kind of the summer strategy overall because it is rather interesting. Then on Tell, so the situation as of today is that he's agreed a deal with. Well, no, sorry, Bayern have agreed a deal. Being very specific on this, Bayern have agreed a deal, according to many. Bayern have agreed a deal with Tottenham for 60 million euros for Tell for a fee. But the player has not yet, and he's still considering his options. There were reports yesterday that he preferred United from people on the Tottenham side. And so it's interesting. If that is the case, then there's still potentially an option here. I believe, depending now, we could be a little bit screwed here because of the deal that Tottenham and Bayern have agreed. That it may change their demands for a deal of him and may force the issue a little bit more. We can't buy him right now. Quite obviously, we can't pay that kind of money, and I don't think we would want to quite yet either. But we probably could afford his wages on a loan for 5 months. I think, again, you're paying on a weekly basis, or I guess you're not necessarily paying on a weekly basis, but it's charging on a weekly basis. So you're actually talking about 5 months, which is about 21 or 22 weeks, and in that way, I think it would cost around 2 million euros or so. But if Bayern now ask for, a decent loan fee on top because they've got this big offer on the table and they want to get some more financial remuneration, that obviously would complicate it a little bit because we can't afford much, and then we would likely need to shed someone in order for that to happen. So it remains a little bit complicated. This one, I don't know what's going to happen at all. I don't think anybody does as of yet. He's in contact with multiple clubs, sounds like us, Arsenal, maybe another, on what he does, where he goes from here, maybe Aston Villa. In terms of the rest of the season, obviously what's important to him is playing. And that's a little bit of an interesting one, is playing time. Because if he joins the United squad now, I look at it and I think, I would put him above Garnacho in terms of his fit and talent. He plays very narrow, close to the goal, off of a striker. And I think that you look and say, okay, well, it kind of makes sense then to play, say him, Xerxes, and Bruno as a front three with Ahmad at wing back, with Dorgu at left wing back. That's a sensible, way of lining the team up that meets what, we would want, and that would be where he'd get a lot of minutes. If that's the way that you were going to go. If he is going to be behind Bruno and behind or around Garnacho, then we may not be offering the best landing spot for him to choose. And so I think a lot of it is really dependent on, again, whether there's viability in the deal, but also what's going to be communicated to him about his position as compared to a player like Garnacho in the team, and where those minutes will come from, because it's going to matter. Now, Tell fits profile-wise a lot better as a narrow front three forward. It would make a lot of sense for him and Bruno to be the 10s. Makes an enormous amount of sense skill-wise and, talent-wise, and where they play and all of that, when you look at the way that Amram has wanted to play. And that, of course, could give us Ahmad on the side. So we'll see where we go on this. We'll see where we go on this. It's really all about whether we can offer him that kind of time, and what his decision is, and that's really going to be dependent on what we say about Garnacho. Now, could there be some sort of domino effect to this? Where this makes Garnacho less needed, even though we're getting to the end of the window. We'll talk about that in a minute, and means we give a deal to Napoli or we give a deal to Chelsea. I have no idea at this point. These are sort of the final decisions being made, but it is an interesting one that we have to think about with Tell. And again, one of the things that is my understanding of it is that while right now it's a loan, it's a player that they like his profile and talent, so they'd want to think about summer. And as part of my understanding on this, they kind of, though we're really running out of time here, want to know what's going to happen with Garnacho and Rashford, because it's going to potentially determine the type of deal or the type of situation or the type of offer or the way that we look at Tell as to whether it's just a loan. If Garnacho stays, do we need it? If Garnacho is staying, do we need it? Does he add more talent? Totally. Will we have the minutes for him? Not necessarily. Will we have the ability to buy him in summer with the other positions that we need? I don't know in that case. It's really dependent on those things. And so a complicated scenario, the whole Tell thing for United, and why I would say as of right this minute, I'd be surprised if we got him. I'd be surprised if we got him, and I'd be surprised if Garnacho goes. But we'll kind of see how this all happens. We will kind of see how this all plays out over the next 24 to 36 hours, because I'm sure it will be, it could even be done today. It could definitely be done today. It could be finished today. We may know where it's going as of today, but obviously it's a really kind of interesting matter. Which leads us, of course, to Garnacho and Rashford's situation. We remain kind of in basic contacts with Chelsea as well as Napoli. But as I said before, on Chelsea, we've kind of told them, look, if you're going to bring a proposal that's suitable for us, we need this pretty soon. We're running out of options. We're expecting that they will bring some sort of offer to the table, perhaps. But again, as I've said many times, it's not like this bid rejected type of thing. There's been some high-level discussions, and we're just sitting kind of thinking, are they going to come back and talk to us now with something or not? And as of yet, they haven't. It's from again, as I gather, if we're not really hearing anything by tomorrow, it's probably it. Maybe even by the end of today. But I would say tomorrow the last real day for this, just because the ability to replace, the ability to do anything, it's coming down, and I think it's been getting more and more unlikely all week that Garnacho goes anywhere. And I said that I think on Monday that I'm leaning towards that he doesn't. And I would say I'm definitely leaning more and more towards that he doesn't, just because there's no real offers on the table that would get him anywhere. And if that's the case, I do think it's less likely we make any signing in the forward positions, even on loan, because one, financially, it may be too tight to happen, though Rashford could change that, but that may go down too far to the wire for us to replace. And two, that we just may not have the space to convince someone, where you look at it and say, okay, well, you bring Tell in now, how many games is he going to play? Especially now that we've got a left wing back. That means you have two right backs. That means Ahmad may be in the forward line more. That means we have, two strikers, Ahmad and Bruno and Garnacho all in there. There may not be a lot of room for another player in. So I think this could have a significant determination on Tell one way or another in terms of how this all works, and complicates things a bit. But we're still waiting to see if Chelsea will bring anything to the table. We could bring something in again without Garnacho leaving, but I'm not sure that we will. And it feels more likely that it's tied to that at this point in time. On Rashford, I do still think it's more likely that he departs before the deadline. Not guaranteed, but more likely. a lot of clubs are simply essentially making us sweat and looking at it and saying, well, we wait to the final moment. You cover as much wages as possible because he's not in the squad, he's not in the team, he's not being used. So cool. Barcelona comes up and says, well, we could afford 80,000 a week. So, you know, on Monday, on February 2nd, we'll offer you 80,000 a week and you cover the rest. And United will have to look at that and say, is it worth saving the couple million? Probably, versus him not playing. And that's, they're kind of holding our feet to the fire on the situation, any of these clubs. And will likely propose a deal very late on that we have to really seriously consider accepting, even if it's not a good deal, simply because what's the point otherwise? It'd be better to have some of Rashford's wages covered and him go and play and increase his value and all of that than to sit and do nothing. So, yeah, I still believe he will be going. From people I speak with, they still think that there will be a deal on the table before the end of the window. And logically, it all makes a lot of sense as well. So I think he will, but I don't think it's going to give us much space. And I think it's going to be likely too close to the deadline. And this is really just due to the overall situation and clubs wanting to squeeze the best deal out of us. In terms of sales, overall, the other people that we could be looking at, obviously there's Casemiro and Malacia, I think are the two other main candidates, barring a random offer for Christian Eriksen for the final 6 months where we'd probably let him go for free, but it doesn't seem like there's any noise on that. There's talk of Casemiro to Roma. That could still be happening, but then there's some talk that he doesn't want to go anywhere and that he's okay just kind of hanging around until the end of till summer in his position. Now, maybe that's simply because he's not getting better offers anywhere else financially, which isn't particular surprise given the wages he's on. But yeah, this is an interesting one because one way or another, United have to solve this. They can't go into next season still paying his wages to not be a player for United. That would be it's a potential huge financial gain shifting him off the books. So United need to find something here, but we haven't really seen anything. We haven't really seen anything to show that it's likely, but obviously United would be open to practically anything at this point. From Casemiro's situation. So we'll see if anything materializes with Roma. Malacia, there's some talk of him going to Betis. There's some talk of him going to Celtic. United, I think, would definitely be open to a loan at this stage. Obviously, with Dorgu completing, they'd be open to it. And getting some more wages off the books. And also, again, a situation where if he can get a loan and he can play regularly in a league that maybe is a team that's a bit lower than United, then increases his value. Very little amortization cost, so he could be sold for very little in summer for United to break even if he can just get that value up. But that would help a lot as well financially. So a lot of it's now is just lining up and preparing for summer. And that's what I want to talk about last, is summer. So let me do this really quick. Here, move this, shrink me down here so we can kind of look at our chart now, which is updated a little bit, as I updated it on the live by going to, by looking at the Dorgu thing. So if we kind of go positionally, we have on the left wing back positions Dorgu and Leon. These are essentially set as of now. We're good in this position. At left center back, with bringing in Aiden Heaven, who is essentially virtually a first teamer, with Shaw then very likely being exclusively in a left center back role whenever he's fit, as depth, with Yoro able to cover it and with Lissandro playing well. Right now, this is semi-solved. Lissandro's in good form as well. He seems to be, even despite some of the concerns growing into it, I think in playing in the better system, we're going to see him less and less exposed for his weaknesses. Long term, we could be looking at an upgrade here, but I can very much see a world where they're saying now, I'm not see a world because they are looking at it and saying we may be able to pass this up. There's been reports on this as well, but we may be able to pass up investing heavily here and instead see how it goes with that, with all these options that we've got. In the middle, Maguire and De Ligt were pretty much solved there. And that means on the right, we have Yoro, De Ligt, and the other consequence of having Dorgu on the left and Leon there next season will be that we can move Dalot and Mazraoui to right wing back, and we have Ahmad as an option there, which means that Mazraoui can be right center back cover. We've seen Dalot play there too, so we probably have enough on this side between all of it. Really, we've got, if we count Mazraoui in there, which I think we should, because I think right center back in the three is probably his best position. We have Yoro, Delict, Mazraoui, Maguire, Lissandro, and Aiden Heaven, and then maybe Shaw at times, maybe Dalot at times. Potentially like 8 options for 3 center back positions. So I think for now they're going to be pretty satisfied with that going into the summer in terms of where we need to invest elsewhere. The right wing back position is probably very much dependent on performance. With this being set up, it's going to have to be decided, is it better with Ahmad there? And if so, that will affect the right wing position. Or does Dalot perform in that position? Or does Mazraoui perform in that position? Or are we in a situation where then neither of them does particularly well there? We like Ahmad there, but that means we will need to buy. I think, based on my understanding of this, it's going to be one or the other rather than both. Getting some sort of a right-sided forward in, ideally, who can play at right wing back. Or if Dalot or Mazraoui does really well there, or we decide that's Ahmad's long-term position, then it would be more just a forward. So it's one or the other, and this is going to be really dependent. So it's based on evaluation, but it's likely we get a forward in there, right? But again, if Dalot or Mazraoui perform really well in that position, then it's less likely we buy a wing back, and we can just simply look to the forward. So this is kind of up in the air. We go to the left side, it's really dependent on Garnacho. If Garnacho performs well, we've got enough. If he's sold, we have to replace him on the left side, period. We've got to replace him. We've got to get another left 10 in there. We've got to get someone. Now, if you look at, and we'll talk about kind of a name like Dorgeles, well, Dorgeles can cover both sides. So, that might be a young option that comes in that can cover both sides, especially, again, if a wingback performs well, then we could get him, and it's a little complicated, but that's still a name to consider, or a similar profile. But we need another forward depending on Garnacho. If Garnacho stays, we still might end up with Dorgeles. If someone like Dalot performs and we need a backup right winger who can kind of float across the front three, Dorgeles still makes a lot of sense. There's other names too that we'll talk about. The one position where it's almost obvious we need someone is at striker, because we have starters in left wing, left 10, right wing, right 10, potentially, right? Depending again. The back line is pretty set. Obviously, we will need a midfielder. We do need a midfielder. Eriksen will be gone come summer, and Casemiro is not really involved. We do need a midfielder, period. But I'm far less convinced than others about us needing a starter to play alongside Ugarte. I think, again, Kobbie Mainoo's being managed, and I think he's being underrated, and I think people are really not understanding the role that's in there. It's especially odd when I keep seeing the suggestion of, playing wingers wide with an inverted fullback, and then suggesting Kobbie can play in the 10. He can't. and if we're ever doing any of that, he definitely can't. But it is not. He really doesn't have the skill set for a 10 in an Amorim team, and that's why he keeps playing him in this position. And I think he'll do really well there, and wants to keep him for the long haul. But we will need a midfielder, and potentially it could be someone who could compete with Mainoo if Mainoo doesn't perform up to the level that is needed. But I think he will, and I think it'll come good the more we continue to play and get to the end of the season. So we do need a midfielder, that's for sure. But we definitely need a striker. Okay. Neither Xerxes or Højlund are lighting it up, and barring a massive surprise, I would expect one of them moves on in summer and we get a striker. And that is the big priority. That's one of the positions they're wanting to evaluate most. And this, again, just kind of summarizing what I've said in some recent videos, they're going to look at it and say, who's going to be our guy to be a rotation or development player next year, and let's bring somebody in. And I think that's where the bulk of our money will go when you look at it. So in evaluating our squad, solving the left side solves a lot of problems because it gives us options across the back line, and it gives us maybe options on the right, and we'll have to see. So If you were to ask me now and I looked at this situation as a whole, I would say realistically, reevaluating everything, it's going to be striker. These are like the guaranteed places we need to make a signing. And then it's going to be 10 or right wing back / right wing. And then number 4 is, 10 pending Garnacho. That's really the situation. These are really the priorities that I see for this window, more this coming summer, long term, but also just based on this overall squad plan that I've understood them to have. We've been moving through it. We're getting the steps we wanted done. This is very likely. Could we do more than that? Yeah. There's also a goalkeeper, which I should add on here. Goalkeeper. Which I should add on here because it's definitely an area that they're signing. A goalkeeper situation, 1 in 1 out, is definitely one to keep an eye on too. That's sort of its own world. That would be it, barring again further potential things. And again, what they'll want is they'll want to have a starter and a good young player to develop in competition and all of that. And so when we look across this out, we're going to want that at striker, a bona fide starter, and then one of these young players to develop behind them. They'll probably feel we've got the starter in Bruno and the starter. Like if you had to ask me now, let's say we have the starter in Bruno, starter in Ahmad. So they need that striker. They'll want to get a development winger. They may want a starting right wing back, depending on Dallo or Mazraoui, or not, depending on Dallo or Mazraoui. And then they will want someone to come in that could be starter quality in the midfield to compete with Mainu. So it makes a lot of sense when we look at it. So if we flip over to our table here a little bit and kind of look at this and see some of the names, we start here in the middle, getting a proven striker. Osimhen, Gyökeres, Benjamin Šeško, Samu Agehawa, and Liam Delap are probably 5 names I would keep the most focus on at the moment that United are interested in. Šeško, of those, I would guess is probably the less likely because he's a bit more of a development player still. The other ones are all performing at a high level already. Both Samu Agehawa and Gyökeres, obviously, who Emram knows very well, are performing really well in Portugal and in their European competitions. Doing extremely well, and both would fit, have the pace to run in, can hold up, have the variation in their game, are doing well. Osimhen, as we know, is a top player. He'd be probably the most expensive option when you factor in wages. And then there's Liam Delap, complicated by City having rights and other things like that. But I think that's one of the, obviously, could there be other names? Yes, but there's not that many top 9s across Europe. So it's very likely to be one of these. If they want someone who's more proven, who's more established, who's effective, it's very likely to be one of these players. Then it's really depending, right? If we were to bring in someone like Tell, yes, he could play both sides, left and right 10, but he's definitely a 10 and not a wing back. He's definitely a narrow 10, not a wing back. So we could bring him in, and that could, even without Garnacho leaving, if a deal materializes there, that could be something. That gives us where we want to go in the long term, and that could be something, right? We'll see what happens there, and that could be an option. And so you could get a striker and Tell, and that would, again, we'll see it maybe in the next few days on that. If he goes to Tottenham, obviously we remove his name. But a striker in Tell or a striker in Cunha, that obviously solves your front line. And probably that also means, at times you could shift Ahmad over into right wing back, and maybe you're not buying a right wing back this summer. But those are options. Then you have someone like Nene Dorgeles that can play on both sides. It's probably more that depth cover that you'd be looking at if Garnacho is staying. And he could cover behind Ahmad. He could play in there when Ahmad goes to right wing back, things like that. So I think one of those kinds of names. Again, then there's the other right-sided potential players. If you're going more expensive or someone like Mbeumo, that probably means you're playing Ahmad at right wing back. But if you go more cheaper, or developmental, like Rig or Mastantuono, we can remove Xavi Simons, right? Because he's just done a giant transfer now. But if you go for Rig or Mastantuono or someone of that nature, then that probably says, we want a right wing back, and there'll be the development behind Ahmad, who's staying on the right side. So, one of these in the middle as a striker, and then probably either one name from the left 10 or the right 10, but we'll probably get more names before summer to add to that too, but that's where we're heading. And then the right wing back position is dependent on that, depending on Ahmad, and depending on, of course, Dallo and Mazraoui. Obviously, we could get, if Garnacho were to stay and perform and become a major part of Amram's team, we could get a striker, we could get Dibbling, and that might be it. And that might solve all the problems, or Kenda, where we get a striker in them, because then they can play right wing back. They can play at right wing in place of Ahmad, and we've got guys on the left. We've got strikers in the middle. So between these kind of front three, we know we'll get a striker, but between left 10, right 10, and right wing back, it's probably one of those, or two, depending on Garnacho. And then in the midfield, is our priority here as well to get somebody. Ederson is definitely a name that they like. We'll come back to. Tchouaméni is an interesting one because he keeps being offered by Madrid to teams around Europe and England for whatever reason, because they want to reinvest elsewhere. It just doesn't fit them. So I'm keeping him on there because United have liked him for a long time. João Gomez at Wolves, if they get relegated or something, you never know there. Adam Wharton maybe has moved way down the list, his injury, surgery, all of that. But if he has a great second half of the season or something, then he probably climb up a lot of teams' list in terms of a potential midfielder to come in that does fit that position. And then we will probably find other names. Obviously in the left center back, there are names, but for now we're going to consider that we may not make a signing in that area. So I think it gives us a decent picture of what we think is going to happen come summer. I think it's starting to become quite understandable, actually, where we may go with all of this. I think, we looking at the strikers, there's our top priority, and then the rest is really going to be dependent. We're going to have to watch how Garnacho does and if he goes. We're going to have to watch where Ahmad plays most of all. We're going to have to watch how Dallo or Mazraoui perform at right wing back. And I think probably by March, we'll know what we're going to do in those positions, at least priority-wise. So we may have a pretty clear plan of where we're going this summer just based on this whole original plan that I got and us moving through it. I actually think it's going to become fairly predictable as a whole, what United end up doing between now and the summer window. So we're not quite done yet. We'll see what happens with Tell, and we'll see what happens with Garnacho and Rashford in the next few days. That could affect all of this. And but at least I think by Monday or Tuesday we'll probably know exactly where we're at, and fairly predictably be able to tell what are we looking for summer. What are we looking for ahead of summer that's going to determine our window and where we're going. And the good news is we can make those purchases. We could afford it with some of the departures. Obviously, the more that depart, maybe the better we can do in all of those. But I think that our squad has the real potential to be, by this summer, which is what they wanted, at least balanced, where we've got a starter that we like and a backup player that's a good development player and not so many wasteful high wages in almost every position. And then it's really just about looking at, does the team grow on that uptrend under Amram? Are there any players that don't take the next step up that we need? And then that's where we start actually fixing the team in a bit more of a sensible way. For so long at United, our transfers we haven't had an established player in a key position, and we're like filling these massive holes. Well, we're solving the left back with the center back situation being solved, with all of that being solved. Realistically now, there's a good chance come summer with a striker and with likely just looking at this right wing back situation and forward situation, we've got all the players. We don't have these glaring holes. Now it's just, do we need an upgrade? And our windows become a lot simpler. Our baseline is a lot higher, and we're not like falling apart every time anything happens. And we can just say, yeah, okay, that player's not performing up to the level that we need. Let's get an established player in and make them depth. And then our team remains strong rather than what it's been. So it's an encouraging plan overall. You may not believe it, but we could. I'm not saying we're one window off competing for titles, but I think we are a one, good summer window here, a realistic summer window here off of having the team we want. And then it's just developing, growing with the manager, and seeing who does take that step up and continue in the development and who doesn't. And if as we go up towards competing, do more holes show up where, okay, that player's just not up to the level that we need, that we will find out. And I think that then following that in the next year, that's when we'll probably be looking at things like, okay, maybe we need one more top athletic center back. Maybe we need one more top midfielder, or maybe we have to start looking at replacing Bruno at that time, just age-wise and all of that, but we will see. So that's what I have for today. Hopefully an interesting summary. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you in the next video.